Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Storybound podcast, where we talk about the intersection of mental health, neurodivergence, and creativity. Today on the podcast, we have Rebecca Scharpf, and I'm very excited to have her on. Rebecca, would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Rebecca Scharpf, and I work with Scrollwork Edits, which is my freelance book editing business. I am autistic and have ADHD, so it's been interesting kind of learning how to run a business while trying not to run myself into the ground and finding that balance. I work primarily with indie authors who are writing fantasy, science fiction, and romance, and I specialize in working with queer and neurodivergent authors. And I also write books and publish on the side, which I'm trying to get back into. I write fantasy with autistic protagonists. So that's been kind of fun too.
I love that. I absolutely love that. My second book, my protagonist is also autistic, and that one was hard for me. I don't want to say hard for me. I loved writing it, but the editing process, I had to be very finding betas who understood that the protagonist was autistic, because I had handed it over to people who, a particular person who was not autistic or ADHD, and they were not understanding at all why Hazel was the way she was. my protagonist. Yeah, I think it's great that we are writing stories like this. I think it definitely needs to happen to provide more visibility for who we are. So what came first? Was it the editing or the writing of the books? Which business started first?
Yeah, so for me, I started writing first. I've been obsessed with books since, according to my parents, since before I could read. I would just sit there and look through books, even the phone book, which is wild.
I did the same. I did the same.
That's so funny. And then as soon as I got my first laptop as a teenager, I was off and I was writing. Started actually doing indie publishing during the onslaught of the pandemic. I had the time then to do that. I had always been interested in editing as well. I had pursued an English degree. I had spent my spare time looking up where should I put commas and how do semicolons work and things like that. And then I started to really struggle in my day jobs. And even though I was either in entry level or just above entry level positions, I was finding it really hard to keep up. I was struggling with fatigue. I was getting dizzy. I didn't realize at the time I was neurodivergent. I only figured that out about 2 years ago. But I was really struggling to mask and to hide the fact that I was autistic, and I worked in customer service, which is probably not the best place to work if you're autistic. But yeah, so my health started declining pretty severely, and I realized that I needed a change. I needed something where I could work from home, where I could have flexible hours, where if I was burnt out or overstimulated, I could just say, okay, I'm done for today. And I was like, well, I've been really interested in grammar and punctuation and stuff, maybe being an editor. So I took a course, learned how to do editing, started working with authors, doing some smaller projects, really fell in love with it, and then just grew it from there. And I would say for my health, that was a huge step. It was risky. It was scary to get it up and running, but it worked out. And hopefully I don't jinx it somehow.
You're not.
But yeah, that's how I kind of got into editing. And it's fun because it keeps me in the same field. So as a writer and an editor, I'm networking with the same people. I'm in the same communities and spaces. So that's been really fun because writing, publishing, grammar are also my special interests as an autistic person. So kind of living the dream in a way.
Yeah, no, there's so much about what you said that resonates with me. The struggle to maintain a job, right? Like a normal kind of job. I've always struggled with that. I've always come home utterly exhausted because I was masking, and as a parent, it was really hard for me to parent when I got home because I'd given everything to my job. And I did the same. I sought out opportunities to work for myself. And I didn't know at the time that I was autistic or ADHD or OCD. And I had 2 businesses. I had one doing photography. I had one doing tutoring because I'm a certified teacher. And I made good money doing both of those, but I burnt out because I was not like listening to my body and listening to my needs and just being fully like unaware of what it is that I needed as a person and not putting systems in place to protect my energy and my mental health. Has that been a challenge at all for you? Like finding systems that work to protect your energy? Because running a business is a lot, right? Like you're wearing all of the hats.
Yeah. It definitely is. I think that's where I'm thankful that I have ADHD as well as autism, because that side of me, I think, helps a lot with pivoting when I need to or coming up with new ideas for the business. That part of me also really likes to run social media accounts and interact with people, where the more autistic side of me is, please help whenever there's people around. But it is difficult. It's a lot easier than a traditional job. But the main issue that I run into is just that the economy right now just really sucks. So there is a lot of pressure to work harder, do more, keep up with your non-disabled or neurotypical peers. And it is hard when you see other people your age who are not disabled, who are buying a house and getting a new car and not having to worry the same way. And so that is difficult to kind of keep myself from burning out when, unfortunately, we do live in this economy where financially it's tough for a lot of disabled people. And there is a lot of that pressure of do more, work harder, take on more. And then I just have to remind myself how badly that's backfired in the past at my more traditional jobs and be like, okay, we can't do this. And it does work out. It's just trusting that it will work out and trusting that it might seem counterintuitive, but if I take a break, I will get more work done than if I just power through and slowly lose steam and then crash. But it feels counterintuitive to just stop.
I agree with that so much. There's so many different points here that, like, again, that resonate with me. The keeping up with our peers. I'm in a part of my life where, like, I'm coming out of divorce and I'm kind of like taking several steps back because of the fact that leading into my divorce, I was falling apart and losing my mask, and now I'm not able to mask, and I've had to make all these changes in my life to protect myself. And so for me, one of the changes that I've made is that I work remotely now. Like, I still work for a company, but it's a lot better for me to not have to wake up and drive to a place, go into a place. It's a lot more protective of my energy. I would say also the company that I work for is I'm a job jumper. Like, I have no shame in saying that, but like, if a company is not protective of like my energy, if they don't care about my energy, then I don't care about them. At my last job, my boss like called me combative because I would ask why. And that's a very like autistic thing. I want to know why things work.
Yeah.
And she called me combative, and it was a really bad experience. So I jumped companies. I have no shame in that because we only have ourselves. Like, no one else is going to look out for us. Yeah. But that also brings me to like the break things, in that I'm kind of in that space right now, in that I was, throughout the summer, I spent all of my waking time like writing. I finished writing a book in beginning of June. I edited the whole thing in June. And then in July, I wrote a whole novella. And then the first half of August, I edited half of it. And I'm kind of at this point where it's like, I'm tired. And I feel really bad that I'm not writing, because writing is my whole life. Like you, it's my special interest. That's why I started this podcast, to like talk to other writers and creatives, and my whole life revolves around it. But I've felt really kind of like this, like friction to sit down and do it. And so I've been having to make peace with myself every day. It's okay, you're not writing. It's okay, you're not editing. Sometimes we need a break. Take the break for a week or two, do other things, read, play video games, watch TV, because if I don't, I'm just going to push myself into a hole. And that is something I've had to learn as I've gotten older, because I used to continue to push. And that's kind of what led to the cracking of my mask and where I'm at today. So it's definitely something that we have to be aware of. But I agree, it's tough. I don't know if you experience this, but being on social media, the whole comparison thing, where you see our peers who are not disabled, who are doing all of the things. Like, do you feel like being on social media is challenging sometimes because of that?
Not too much. I think I'm a little bit of an outlier in that I don't compare myself a lot on social media, but also I don't think I follow a lot of people that I would compare myself to, which helps. But I think for me, it's more in general. You go out and about and you see people driving these fancy cars, then you're like, oh, they're my age. Or someone invites you to their house and you're like, oh, you're my age and you own a house, or you're my age and you're eating at restaurants every other day. So for me, it happens more in real life than online. And again, it could just be because maybe the way I curate my online spaces. But I definitely think that's valid. And I think for a lot of neurodivergent people struggling with mental health concerns, or people who are otherwise disabled, it is really hard, because there is that societal pull yourself up by your bootstraps. If you're not making ends meet, you're not working hard enough, you're not trying, you're not passionate enough. And there's a lot of shame and guilt around just stopping to rest. And I think for a lot of us, there's also a sense of insecurity around resting. If I slow down, am I not going to be able to pay my bills? If I slow down, is my life going to fall apart? Because there isn't always that same buffer, and not even financially, but just energy level. So I struggle with fatigue. I think it goes deeper than the fatigue that one would have around like being autistic. I think there is a physical dynamic, although it's not diagnosed yet. So who knows? But for me, like even microwaving a meal, sometimes I need to lie down after that. And that's hard when you see someone else who's like cooking their dinner and you're like, I would love to cook a dinner from scratch, but I can't. And I think we are seeing more representation of disability in books, movies, etc., but it's still so behind. And so even consuming media can trigger that comparison of, well, these characters in this movie they went on a hike and then they cooked a meal. I could never even do one of those things in a day. Yeah, it's definitely very valid. And even if it doesn't happen on social media, you do feel that for sure.
I agree. So I've gotten better about curating my online space because I've had to do it to protect my mental health. So I'm not comparing. So over time, my feed has gotten full of people who are more like myself.
Yeah.
So maybe they're autistic or ADHD, disabled in whatever capacity. And that has helped. It's definitely helped. It made me not feel alone, because I do see that. I do feel like the real life kind of hurts the most, and that like people my own age seem to be doing a lot more. And I'm not. I've had to like drastically reduce my workload, which means less money, right? And so I've had to really take a hard look at my budget and like what I can afford. Like, what streaming services do we have? Is there a way to reduce our insurance, our phone bills? Like, I've had to do that in order to protect my energy, because even for a while there, right after my divorce, I was working 2 jobs, and I just like November of last year, I was like, I can't do it anymore. I was like, I cannot do it. And I've had to really readjust my budget and cut things that maybe would have been nice to have just to protect my mental health. Am I a happier person now? Absolutely. But it's like you said, it's not like we get to go eat out every week and all of that. So it feels like we should be, and I hate that word, that should word, like we should be. I just feel like it's such a trap. It makes us feel so bad. It's so laden with like shame and guilt, like you were saying, because I think should is tied to that like bootstraps mindset
100%
about
100%. And I agree with what you sorry.
No, go for it.
I agree with what you said about finding community that's experiencing the same things. That's been like game changer for me. Like even the fact that we can talk about it and be like, yeah, we've had to cut because I've done the same thing, had to cut streaming services or look at, okay, is there a cheaper phone company or car insurance and crunch those numbers. And I think within communities of people who are experiencing the same thing, there's a lot more openness about talking about those things and normalizing. And I think there's also more, something that sometimes helps me is like the economy does suck. And that's not me.
No, it does. It's crap right now.
Like trying to go to the grocery store and get, for the longest time, I was like, I'm cutting back on name brands and I'm getting cheaper stuff. Why am I spending more? What's wrong with me? And then someone was like, it's not you, it's the economy. Like you're saving more, but they're charging more than you're able to save.
They are. And I see that because I used to, before I was divorced, we used to be a family of 5, right? And we were on a budget just because we were a family of 5 and we made good money combined. Me and my ex-husband. But we had things like the student loans and car payments. And so that it wasn't that like we weren't making good money. We weren't on a budget because we weren't making good money. It was because we had all of these other things that came with like the white picket fence that we idolize. And I was spending maybe like $180 a week for a family of 5 on groceries.
Oh my God, that's good.
And now it's just now it's just me. And I was a budget shopper. I was spending like 180, maybe 200 if I needed extra stuff, like we were running low on certain things. And now I'm spending the exact same for 2 people. And it blows my mind. It blows my utter mind that was 3 years ago. Like it has shot up in recent years. And I see it in other places too. Even my insurance, it used to be cheaper than what it is now, and it's gone up. And I saw stuff on like TikTok of people talking about like their insurance like doubling in certain states and things like that. So this is not or my rent is ridiculous. I had a fit about my rent because we're living in the same place, just re-signed our lease. And they jacked up our rent. And when we were renewing, that really upset me because it's not like nothing's changed in my little townhome that I'm in, and it's really old, right? But I crunched the numbers and I was like, we would spend this much on a new down payment for a place. We'd spend this much on the U-Haul. Like we would spend this much on like eating out and delivery of food, like the week we moved, because nobody is cooking when you're moving.
No, I just moved a month ago and no, you're not.
The worst. And we're talking about people who already have low energy levels, right?
Exactly.
So we're definitely eating out. So I crunched those numbers and I was like, okay, we're going to spend an extra $2,000 this year on our rent, but we would spend that $2,000 to move. So is it worth the time off work, the energy investment? And we were like, nope, we're just going to stick it out. We're going to stay at least for 18. Yeah. So it's tough. It's definitely, the economy has gotten worse. Do you feel like the pressure of the economy and needing to pay your bills, do you feel like that affects your creative process at all?
Definitely. Because I spend more time stressing about finances, about projects, because I don't want to take on too many projects either, because then I'm not delivering the quality that I want to. I try to give the max that I can take on, but that's the max I can take on. And running at max capacity always is that road that leads to burnout. And so I find that I've been investing all of my time into editing. When I'm not editing, I'm stressing about finances and stuff. And right now I'm in a good place. I moved to an apartment that I got a pretty good deal on, actually, and I'm very excited and happy. And it's helped my mental health a lot to not have to mask around roommates or things like that. So it's been a really positive thing. But there is just that reality of without a roommate, there's a higher rent and all of that. And I'm either exhausted because I'm focusing all my energy on just the editing, or I'm just stressed and having a hard time relaxing. And it's, even if I know things are okay, I've been in situations where things haven't. So it's sometimes hard to trust that. And so it is hard to be more creative when you're stressed or when you are pouring all your energy into one thing. And that has been a bit frustrating as well, because I suspect that if I'm able to do more of like writing and being creative, I think that will also help with the stress and help with everything else. But again, it's hard. It feels counterintuitive again to pour money into writing, which may or may not make money, versus pouring it into editing, which will make money.
Well, which will make money.
Mhm,
Yeah, I
mhm.
get that. That's
It's tough.
definitely
Balance.
feel like my writing is an investment into my future self at this point. You know, because
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Yeah,
see the
absolutely.
benefits, especially because so many authors, to be that author where you write one book and it like takes off, like that's a lightning strike, whether it's
Yeah.
indie or traditional, because it happens in both realms. I was reading a book about, not a book, I was reading a Discord group for indie authors, and I was reading this post about from an indie author who their book went viral on TikTok. So they made all this money and they shared their stats and how they got there and all of this. But that's a lightning strike. And that's the same thing with things like A Quarter Throne of Roses. Like that's a lightning strike. That is not the norm. Most authors are writing 3 to 6 books before they're making steady income.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not easy to write a book. It takes a long time to write a book. So it's definitely an investment in both time, money, energy, because you have to pay money for editing. So I get it. It's tough. It's super, super tough. Do you have any other challenges that you feel like you face in your creative journey besides maybe energy? Because I know that's been a big topic, or like the economy. Are there any other things that like you're struggling with at all?
Ooh. I think one of the things, so to go more into writing than the editing side, one of the things that I have been trying to figure out. So I was very passionate about my writing. When I first started writing, I was trying to make it perfect and it was not fun. And then slowly I was able to, after several years, I was able to kind of shut that voice down a little bit more. But then a couple of years ago, when I realized that I was autistic, I remember feeling really discouraged instead of excited about my books, because I looked back at what I had written and realized that it was written from an autistic point of view with autistic characters. And I think I'm starting to come out of it, but I'm still struggling a bit with that discouragement of, can I ever make money off of these books if they have autistic characters? Are people going to like reading this? Because myself and I've talked to a couple other autistic authors, and we've received feedback that our characters are too whiny and too immature and too whatever, and they're just autistic. So there is a little bit of discouragement of, oh, maybe I'm writing something nobody ever wants, or maybe I'm writing something nobody can ever connect with. Obviously, hopefully other autistic people would, but is that a big enough pool to market to? And I think it is. And I think that there is a community out there that is really wanting more neurodivergence in books. But yeah, just kind of struggling with, I think when you go through life, having people not treat you the best, because even though I didn't know I was autistic, nobody else knew it, they knew that I was different, right? And so you get treated different. And it's hard not to put that onto my books and be like, okay, well, my books are probably going to get treated the way I was treated. And so should I keep writing? Should I keep pouring into this? And like I said, I'm kind of coming out the other end of that. I found some other autistic authors who have been really encouraging and shared their struggles. But that did take a little bit of a hit to the creative side for a bit there. I kind of put things on pause for a little, trying to navigate how I felt about that.
No, I relate to that so much. I relate to that so much because I was halfway through my second book when I got diagnosed. And I had been self diagnosed for a while.
Yeah.
But when I got my official diagnosis, that made me realize, yeah, my protagonists are definitely autistic. And I went through the same sort of journey about it. I'm still kind of there. That's why my second book has been shelved at this point. It's been edited, it's been to beta readers. I need to been working through the beta reader feedback and like making those edits. So it's like almost ready to be like out in the world, but I've like my motivation
do anything with putting out in the world has really diminished because I do feel very unsure if people will even like it. And that happened even with beta reader feedback. It was like some people got it and they loved it. And they loved the neurodivergent kind of representation of Hazel's both autistic and kind of like ADHD things that she does. And it was clear to me that there was one particular beta reader who like she just didn't get it. And you could tell she was like, why is she saying this? Like, why is she so stiff? Why is she pointing that out? And it's, well, she's doing all this because she's autistic. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, it's made me very doubtful about whether I want to publish it. And I'm really proud of that book, which is kind of the crappy part.
I feel that.
I think it's well written. I think it has a lot of twists and turns, and it's a nice little mix of like paranormal romance, but like cozy, neurodivergent. I don't know. I love it. I think it's a great book. I don't know that I'll do anything with it now because I'm so terrified of being perceived.
and I think I think it's hard because I think most people are terrified of being perceived, but I think when you're neurodivergent, there's an extra layer because I think that there have been a lot of times, and this is probably true for you as well, where you have been perceived and something negative has happened. Someone's been mean to you, someone's bullied you, your employer started giving you funny looks, whatever it is. And back to the rejection sensitivity thing, like for a lot of neurodivergent people, it's a safety thing. It's not just being paranoid or being sensitive. We've associated the way that we're perceived and potential criticism as, oh, this could be a dangerous situation. This could be something where I have to be on high alert. And it's hard to turn that off in situations where maybe that's not the case. But I do also think you should publish because I think there are a lot of us who need that representation. And as a book editor and as an avid reader, there are a lot more, just even in the past year, there's a lot more autistic representation from autistic authors coming out in books. And it's actually been pretty exciting, especially in like paranormal romance, cozy, kind of the same that you're talking about. And that's been exciting as an editor to see that coming up in more of the projects that I'm working with. So I think as people talk more about autism, ADHD, other neurodivergencies, I think we're going to see readers understanding it more going into it. So that's my hope, that we're like on this cusp of the way that it's perceived slowly changing. But that's still so valid, just being like, it's hard enough to be perceived in real life. Now I have to like not only be perceived by readers, but I also have to market myself and act like I want to be perceived.
It's that community piece, right? It's that community piece. And I guess I still see sort of like negative things on social media. And these are probably people from either outside of the community, like at least the neurodivergent community, or they're people in the neurodivergent community that like want to gatekeep because they do exist. And I'd be like, you see things on like social media that's like, everyone's autistic now, everyone has ADHD, and it's just that like a lot of women were never diagnosed because we are more covert, and now we're older and we're finding that our lives are really difficult compared to our peers, and we're getting the help that we need, or we're trying to get the help that we need, because not everyone has access to healthcare, and not everyone has money for healthcare. So it's still not even, I bet you, as diagnosed as it should be. But my point is that like negative rhetoric is not great for us. I do think the representation that you're talking about, like the more that we do continue to talk about it, the more that we continue to write these books, I do think the narrative will change in time. And I would like to be a part of that change and a part of making a difference in our community. So I probably will publish it. I'm working up the confidence. Done. Like it's pretty much done at this point. So yeah, I probably will. I'm just a little scared right now. I'll get there. So I'd love to ask about like support for you. We've talked about rest a lot as like a coping mechanism. And we've talked about community a couple of times. Is there a way that people in your life, whether online friends or people in real life, is there ways that they could better support you on your creative journey? Is there some kind of change that you would like to see within the community? Do you think that would be good for all of us, or something even personal? Like, what would make you feel more supported, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because as you were talking, the first thing that came to mind was like, oh, my community already is pretty supportive. But then the second thing that came to mind is that I mask very heavily online and even on my Instagram page. And that's not to say that what I post isn't genuine, but I do mask. I'm very smiley and laughy in my reels because I think that's more approachable and whatever. And so I think it would be nice to, and I haven't really tested this, so maybe my community would already be fine with this, but it would be nice to feel more comfortable if I don't make facial expressions, if I don't make eye contact, if I, maybe post things that are more random sometimes and more less structured and professional, and kind of allow myself to unmask a little bit. And that for me has been difficult because in the past, even when I have told people, hey, I'm autistic, and they'll be like, oh, okay, that's fine, that's great. And then the instant I start unmasking, they're like, oh, never mind, bye. And that's more for real life than online. But yeah, I think I would love if we normalized not masking, not having to make eye contact or facial expressions, fidgeting, having fidgeting devices, and just if we normalized some of those visual tells that people might be autistic or might be neurodivergent. And I'm not sure how we would do that. I think, unfortunately, it just starts with normalizing it. And that would start with me, experimenting
Normalizing
with
it for yourself, you
Yeah,
know?
normalizing it for yourself. And then because there are so many other autistics that are on social media that are out there who, and some of whom can't mask. And so I think there is support out there. It's just scary testing the waters because some people are going to leave, some people might stay. But yeah, I think that would be the biggest thing for me, is to just have it a little bit more normalized, that there are multiple different ways that people present. Like, I can be super joyful and not be smiling at all. But that's me expressing joy. Yeah, I don't know exactly what that would look like, but that's kind of the first thing that came to mind for
I
me.
understand what you're talking about. I do think this is more of a societal thing, right? I think this goes beyond our community, unfortunately, this particular issue, because in the job that I left for my new company, my manager was like, another thing that she said to me was like, you never look like you're having fun in the meetings. You look like you don't want to be here. And I'm pretty sure in this podcast right now, if people are watching it, I don't look like I want to be here. But that is me unmasked. Me smiling, me doing all that stuff. Like, it does come up sometimes. Of course I smile, of course I laugh, but having that face on 24/7 is a mess for me. It's not that I don't want to be here. It's not that I don't want to be in the meeting. It's just like, being on video, for one, is really hard for me. Like, I am constantly like checking my face, and then I see my face and I'm like, oh, you need to correct because you look like a bitch. Like, people are gonna think you're, and I've gotten that a lot when people met me growing up. Oh, I thought you were a bitch, like, because of just the way I carried myself and the way that my face was.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of this negative rhetoric societally that if it doesn't look like we're having a good time, we're bad people or we suck. But I have to do it to preserve my energy. Like, I have to do it to preserve my energy. Like, I still have to get through my daytime job, and I have meetings there. So it's like, I cannot afford to mask on my own free time. Like, I can't.
I love that. That should be on a shirt.
I can't afford to. But I do think we can be part of that change. I do think that it can start with us. If we start doing it and normalizing it, it's nothing is accomplished. Like, change like this doesn't happen overnight. It starts with one person and then another person and another person. And I think we have to make that conscious choice to be a part of the change. And I'm playing with it too. I would say, like on Threads is probably my most unmasked version of
Same.
myself. Like I just
Yes.
spew nonsense on there. Like it is like all the little random thoughts that I have throughout the day.
I love that.
But Instagram, TikTok, definitely more masked.
Yeah.
Way more masked. So I get you there. I need to work on that too, because I would like to be a part of the change. So maybe that's something I'll play with. Maybe I'll try to post a reel or a TikTok today and not be all smiles, and like maybe I'll try to be a little more authentic. I'll give it a try today, see how it feels, see how it's received.
Exactly.
I think that's where it starts. How about let's talk moving, like looking forward for you. You obviously are writing books, you have this editing business. Do you have any particular goals or things that you hope to accomplish in the later half of this year or even in the next 2 or 3 years? What is your main focus? Is it continuing to grow that business? Is it getting back to writing books? Is there something non-creative that you kind of want to explore and do?
Yeah. So for me, I think I really want to get back into writing books. So part of the reason that I stopped was that discouragement that we talked about. But the other reason was that I was focused on growing my editing business so I could leave my day job. And I realized that I couldn't work a day job in editing business and do my writing. It was too much on my plate. Now that my editing business is up and running, I really want it, in a way, need, because like you said, it's like that special interest. It's that thing that keeps me going. I need to integrate that writing back in. And so I am hoping to, I have a couple books out and I am just kind of revamping them a little, like adding the content warning lists, which back when I published wasn't talked about as much. So I hadn't included them, but now I really want to, catching any last typos and just allowing myself to read through the series to kind of get back to working on the next draft, which I already have drafted. I just need to reorient myself and get back into it. But then I really want to get back into indie publishing and making sure that original passion that I was chasing still has a place. And on a personal level, I think just implementing more self-care into my schedule. I think I found a lot of good processes that help me to accommodate myself and to take care of myself, but I think it could also be better. So yeah, so doing more self-care, leaving some more room for rest, but then also getting back to that thing that I really loved is my big goal for the year.
I love that. I love that. I think that's good. Yeah, I don't feel like if we're autistic, we can stay away from our special interests all that long. You know what I mean? Like it brings us too much joy. Yeah, it brings us too much joy. It makes us feel I feel like for me, very centered in myself. Like I'm doing what I'm made to do.
Yep.
So I love that you're making that a priority and a goal. I think we all could probably use a little more self-care in this day and age, in this economy. So I love that too. And I just want to thank you, Rebecca, for coming on here and sharing so much about yourself and your struggles. And just, you have such a, by the way, very calming sort of energy for me. Just so you know, you're not very, I can get very activated very quickly. And that's when I'll start being very like up, but you have a very calming energy. And I have just really loved
I get that a lot.
To you. You do. You have a very calming energy. But where can our listeners find you? I know where to find you, but where can they find you?
For editing stuff, you can find me on scrollworkedits.com. I'm also on Instagram and Threads and TikTok, although I'm still figuring TikTok out. It's very different than Instagram. But my handle on all of those is, and then for my books, you can just look up RebeccaScharpf.com and find my books there.
Amazing. Do you have, just before we jump off, do you have a preference of what social media platform are you more active on?
I would say probably Instagram. I'm the most active on there. So if you find me on Instagram, it'll have a bunch of resources and fun reels and memes and informational posts all smushed together, which is how I second.
I second that. I've definitely seen your Instagram, and there's definitely a wealth of knowledge and information on there. So I highly suggest checking it out if you're listening. And I have one last question. I ask this to everyone. What is something, like, let's assume that the people who are listening maybe already know you, right? Like they already know you through social media. They've been following you. So what is something that maybe is not so common that people don't know about you. Favorite TV show, favorite plant, a weird vacation you went on, something like that.
So something that not a lot of people know is that one of my special interests is horses. I don't ride, but I watch a lot of YouTube videos about horses and horse care and different types of bridles and saddles. And it's the oddest thing because, again, I don't ride, but I just think horses are really cool. I have several horse video games. Growing up, I was obsessed with collecting all those PC games, and they came out in these boxes in the store, and I would just run and get them and figure out what the best horse games on the market were. Yeah, but that's a special interest I don't talk about as much because I feel like since I don't ride, I'm still a bit of an outsider. But yeah, that's something not a lot of people know, is that I'm very much into horses.
That's cool. That's
A little
very,
random.
very cool. No, I get it. I'm very much to like my non-related to writing special interest is like mushrooms. Like I love
That's really
like
cool.
categorizing mushrooms, and I like learning about the different varieties, and we all have our like little thing. But that's something I talk about often. And I never realized it was a special interest for me until I was drawing them all of the time. I was like drawing all the different varieties and stuff. And I was like, there's something here.
I
And
love that.
I'll go into deep dives. Like, I won't come out of like a hole that I get sucked into for a while, like reading about them and stuff. So I get you. I love that. I want to say thank you again, Rebecca, for being here. You've been just lovely to have. I also want to thank our listeners for being here and for listening. Please go find Rebecca. Again, she's very calming and she's a wealth of information on Instagram. So thanks for being here, everyone. Take care of yourselves.